Greetings one and all. Welcome to the first screencast in the Introduction to Cake series. My name is Jason Rose, and today we will be discovering very simply how to install Cake. And so when you first get your zip file with Cake PHP, you're going to see that we have three different directories. We have an app directory, a Cake directory, a vendors directory, and a couple of files. You don't necessarily need the README, but you do need the index.php and the htaccess file. So when you take these folders and you extract them to your web directory, if you wanted to have it in a separate directory such as demo or test or what have you, by all means. And for demonstration purposes, I did exactly that. I have my Cake directory installed right here. In my demo folder off of my local host and my running XAMPP. So let's go ahead and get started. Once you actually install this, if you were to try and open up your web browser, you'd get a little something like this. See here I'm in localhost/demo, and it tells us we've got a couple of things to do before we can be able to start programming and developing and making our application. So let's go ahead and follow these little instructions here. First of all, we've got to change our security.salt value, and for those of you who don't know, salt is the extra layer of security for hashing passwords to make them just a little bit more random, if you will. And it even tells us exactly where to go to install to change this value. It's going to be in our app directory, which, just so you know, app is where we do most of our development, and in the config directory and core. So let's go ahead and change this value here. I'm going to open up app, config, and our core.php. And we're just going to scroll down and go for our salt here. And we just need to change this default salt to any kind of random string. So just for demonstration purposes, I'll just throw in a random string here. Alright. So now we've got the salt changed. Let's go ahead and look at what else. We've got our temp directory, which is already writable. If this was not writable, it would tell us where to go to and which directory to make writable. But just so you know, it is right here within the app directory, this temp directory right here. We are using the file engine for caching to change that. It's also within the config/core.php, but let's just leave that alone. And also, Cake PHP is very highly database driven, and so it needs us to set up our database configuration file. It notices that we have our default already there, and we just need to rename that to config.database.php, basically just getting rid of that default. So let's go ahead and do just exactly that. Inside here, in our app/config folder, we've got our database.php.default. And I'm just going to rename that by getting rid of the .default here. And while we're in here, we should go ahead and change the values to connect to your database. It's got some comments and documentation on what exactly to do here, but we need to only change this default value within this class of database config. We only need to change the host, the login, password, and database. If you want to use prefixes, you can. It's not necessary. For the purposes of this demonstration and these screencasts, my host is localhost, and typically when you're developing hit websites, your host will also be the local host. And for my purposes, we've got a login of root 0, no password here, and I've got a test database that's running. And so I save this information, and we go back to our page for just where the installation of Cake is. I'm going to refresh this, and as soon as my browser loads it up here, we will see that we are ready to go and ready to start building our first Cake PHP application. And that concludes our first screencast. Next screencast, we will be getting into further development, learning about controllers and views, and how they all work within Cake PHP. Thank you very much.